It's funny. So I just wrote a piece on this. It appeared in the New York Times on Wednesday. And, we can look at all the individual flaws. We can talk about uh, inadequate defenses of the companies hacked. We can talk about inadequate security in supply chain. I think there's a huge conversation there. What I wrote about in the New York Times are the economic problems. That in fact, SolarWinds, as a private equity funded company, is incented to skimp on security. Right? To private equity companies try to cut costs to the bone to increase profits short term, and they effectively pushed risk onto their users without the users knowing about it. And so I really see a fundamental economic problem. And I think this is really important in cybersecurity, that we're techies. We tend to focus on the tech. We tend to focus on the math, the crypto, the computer security, the code. But very often, they're economic considerations that are at the core. And I teach cybersecurity policy at the Kennedy School. These are policy kids, and I try to teach that if you need to get the economics right, you need to get the incentive structure right. Ross Anderson writes about this, so I'm putting a link to my my op-ed in the chat, so you can go look at it. Others write about this. Tyler Moore writes about this. I think economics is really important. If you get the economics wrong, it doesn't matter how good your math is. No one will use it. If you get the economics right, then the good math will be developed. So there's a lot of blame to go around, but I don't think there's enough talk about the fundamental economic system. So that's sort of one. And the second place we need to talk about is the supply chain. Right? Supply chain attacks are a big deal. They're getting bigger. We're just seeing more and more and more of them. The software is so complex and so international interdependent that it's really hard to understand where your vulnerabilities are. So near as we can tell, this is a Czech company owned by Russians, wrote a library that SolarWinds used that allowed the attackers to get into the company, to the update server, target an update to add malicious code. That update gets automatically downloaded by 8,000 SolarWinds customers installed in their networks. And now the Russians can attack those networks. Like a really complex attack. You probably saw that Microsoft's Brad Smith says like 1,000 people worked on it. Now, I think that's an overstatement, but this is a massive intelligence operation. And one that even though this was discovered, we haven't cleaned them out, right? Because you know how these attacks work. The Russians can't target 8,000 companies. So they pick and choose. You get into a company, and then you burrow in deep. You add other entry points. You hide malware. So they're embedded in who knows how many companies around the world. Organizations, government and non-government. And the only way to get them out is to burn the network to the ground. So, there's a lot of blame to go around. And I really hope the NSA is doing a huge analysis of why did we miss this? Because we missed it. FireEye had to tell us. That's not okay.
Yeah.
All right. So should I answer the question in the chat, or you want to?
Yeah.
All right. So Ross, who I don't see his name, but I assume he's somewhere, asked about Florida. Really interesting. Florida is my guess. The first question to ask is, who do you think did this? Right. So I guess your choices are a foreign government, a bored hacker, a criminal, or an insider. Right. Those are the four categories. This probably is one of. If I was to guess, I would say insider. It's some disgruntled employee or ex-employee. It is interesting there has been no arrest yet. I am surprised by that because it seemed like kind of a dumb attack. I think infrastructure is very vulnerable, right? We know that Russia attacked the Ukraine power grid twice. I'm going to get the years wrong, like 2014, 2016. Wikipedia knows the years. We know that Russia's in the U.S. power grid. We know the U.S. is in the Russian power grid, where everyone's in everybody else's power grid. And infrastructure is, right, it's old systems. It's kind of internet often bolted on. And yes, very vulnerable. I don't think industries are prepared for this, is a part of the question, because honestly, it's not in their pay grade. Right? A water treatment plant in Florida against the government of Russia is just not a fair fight. And so what do? Do we expect government, right? UK government, US government, French government, German government, Israeli government to take over security? Do we have to pay them to do it themselves? We don't have a good answer here. I see a question from Dan. Okay, so this is about what about vendor responsibility? So this gets back to economics. The economics for Thoma Brava, and that's the name of the private equity company, Brazilian owned, that owns SolarWinds, is to maximize shareholder revenue by cutting costs. And because the buyer can't tell secure from insecure, right, the buyer doesn't know. And effectively, Thoma Brava moved risk from SolarWinds to SolarWinds customers without their knowledge or consent. So how do we fix this? Right, we have to change the incentive. Part of that is going to be regulation. Right? If you have to meet these cybersecurity requirements, if you're going to sell to the U.S. government, is a perfectly reasonable regulation. It could be like a product safety regulation. You must meet these requirements or you can't sell your product. It could be liability. Right? All of your customers can now sue you for providing inadequate security. In a sense, I don't care which one we do, but I need to raise the cost of insecurity. I need to make security cheaper than security. Otherwise, Thoma Brava will never consent to their companies spending more money on security than they absolutely have to. Right? And once I change that economic incentive, now all technology gets brought into play. But without that economic change, no technology will ever be used. All right, see a question from Michael. Wow, if we were to start again, those thought experiments are in a sense frustrating and futile because we can't start again. But in the early days of the internet, it's actually important to understand, security was deliberately excluded from the design of the internet. I mean, you can talk to the people who designed the internet; they're still alive. And what they say is, what we decided for a couple of reasons. One, the internet wasn't used for anything important ever. And two, you had to be a member of a research institution to get access to it in the first place. Right? So you had those two reasons why we didn't care about security. Also, actually, let me do it the other way. So the designers of the internet basically said that we are not going to build security into the backbone. And if an application wants security, they can bolt it on top. Right? You can build an encrypted communications app on top of the internet. But domain name, IP addresses, routing, none of those have any security built in. Right? Because no DNS security, and that was done deliberately. Right? And then you had this system where the internet was being used by these massive mainframes that had a lot of security. You fast forward to like the 1980s, 1990s, you have computers that were never designed to be on a network connected to a network that was never designed to have insecure computers attached to it. Right? And those two things happened. And that is why you don't have internet security, basically. Right? So if you were to do it again, you would change that. Right? You would fix that. You would you would build security into the internet protocols from the beginning. Because the assumptions you made when you decided not to do that turned out not to be true 20 years later. All right, I lost my my chat. Where'd the chat go? Oh, there it is. Hang on. You're asking questions faster than I can answer them, which you're allowed to. All right. What are your views on how crypto libraries are implemented in the software development cycle? All right. So we're getting back to supply chain. Right. So, right. Companies use all sorts of libraries, not just crypto, lots of libraries. And we are learning that one of the ways to attack companies is to attack those libraries. So a lot of people saw the article from like last week. So here's an interesting attack. And someone invented this maybe 2 weeks ago. Most modern software uses a collection of libraries, some internal, some external. Right? So you're Megacorp, and you have your own internal libraries that you put in your build process, use a lot of libraries from GitHub and wherever else, and then you compile it and you make your software. So someone realized that if he could figure out the name of a library that a company uses that's internal to its network, and it creates another library with the same name and a higher version number in a place where the build, whatever build process is going to look, he can sub libraries. And he did that as an experiment with a bunch of companies and managed to get malware into their networks that way. Like, really clever attack. And there are ways you can, without attacking the network, discover the names of these libraries. All right, so libraries are an enormous time saver, but potentially dangerous. So I do want more clarity. I do want more security here. And this is hard. From Peter, governance and accountability. Yes, I'm a big fan of the soft sciences in cybersecurity. And in my class, I teach economics and I teach psychology. I mean, this book of mine, Liars and Outliers, is basically the sociology of security. So, I don't think, like, less glamorous to techies, but I really think that's where a lot of the real work has to be. And, you look at my career, it's been an endless series of generalizations. I started out in cryptography. I started out in math. And I have generalized to computer security, network security, psychology of security, economics of security, psychology of security, sociology of security. Now I really do the political science of security. And those things matter. And understanding up and down, I think is important. So yes. From someone, I lost you. From MI ... Why don't I see your real name? Who knows? Okay. Hello, MI ... What do you see as the major InfoSec risks next bunch of years? I think it's very hard to predict future. I think everyone answers those questions, they tend to be wrong, right? Because if we could predict them, they would be happening now. Sort of by definition, the future risks are unpredictable. But if I was to point to one thing that I think is going to cause us a lot of work, it's going to be AI. And that is because of its unpredictability. Right? AI advances are sort of fundamentally discontiguous. Things we think are easy end up being hard. Things we think are hard end up being easy. Right? When I was a student, I learned that Go would never be solved by an AI because it was computationally, it blew up exponentially too fast. Right? You just couldn't do those kind of searches until like 1 month when Google says, "Oh yeah, we solved Go because we were bored," just by throwing more computation at it. So I think it's going to be a lot of those sorts of things. And it's going to be really interesting to look at what happens when AIs are on the attack and they are on the defense. Like when attacks already happen at computer speed, but when attack autonomy happens at computer speed, and then when defense happens at computer speed, right? Who has a fundamental advantage? And I don't know the answer. It is unlikely that attack and defense will be equally improved by AI. Right? There will be some difference, and we don't know what that is. I think one thing that is going to be interesting to watch is vulnerability finding. Right? Finding vulnerabilities in code is something that sounds like a good machine learning task. It's boring and repetitive. It's pattern matching. Right? Requires some creativity, but not much. Right? So you could easily imagine that you could build an AI to find all the vulnerabilities in code, right? And once you do that, it becomes part of the compiler. You could fast forward 20 years and software vulnerabilities are a thing of the past, right? That would be an enormous change. There's a bad boundary, right? Because, you're going to define all the vulnerabilities in the old stuff, but I don't know if that's possible. Hang on, I'm searching another link for you. All right. Okay, guest lecture, quantum computing. So I am posting a link in the chat with the as an essay of mine with the great title of Cryptography After the Aliens Land, where I talk about quantum computing. My analysis in the end is it's not going to be that much of a big deal. That it'll be major changes, but it's not, it's not security ending changes. Like we know in symmetric cryptography, just double the key length and you're fine. Because of Grover's algorithm. That's sort of a limitation. We know that it will, in theory, break all of known public key algorithms, but NIST is already working on quantum resistant public key algorithms. And we have lots of symmetric only distribution systems that work just fine. So that's a short take. The essay is good. It's not a long essay. I think it should appear in IEEE Security and Privacy. So I recommend that for people interested in my thinking on that. Questions about timing, we have no freaking idea. I mean, we know that the engineering problems to making a workable, useful quantum computer are hard, but we don't know if they are either send a man to the moon hard or faster than light travel hard. And we literally don't know which one. So it's very hard to figure out time. My guess is it is within the scope of human engineering, but I don't know when. A question from Robert about Tim Berners-Lee and Solid. Robert might not realize it, but I'm actually I work for the company that Tim Berners-Lee founded to try to commercialize Solid. The company is called Inrupt. So that means I think pretty good about it. And what it is, if people don't know, it is a new way to conceptualize data that will be stored by the person the data is about and not by the companies with whom you create it with. And then companies get access to your personal data store. They're called pods. I think it is potentially revolutionary, and it will change the way we deal with the internet. It's Tim Berners-Lee. It's kind of, he's kind of an amazing guy. So I'm optimistic. It's hard to make changes like this. So we'll see what happens, but it's something I'm a part of. This is Catherine. About security updates. I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll talk about updates in general. I mean, patching is starting to fail because the economics, this gets back to economics, right? The economics of patching is that you have these expensive objects, and there's an engineering team, in this case at Apple, who sits around writing patches and pushing them down on my phone, and the phone increasingly gets irritated at me until I install them. And that ecosystem doesn't exist for low-cost consumer devices. Right? A home router is designed by an ad hoc team that comes together, writes the software, and then disperses. They don't stick around to write patches. And a lot of these devices can't be patched. My home router, the way I patch it is I throw it away and buy a new one. I mean, it's kind of a crappy mechanism, but it's all we have. So I don't know how we are going to deal with patches. Catherine mentioned older devices, and that's also interesting. So think about a car, right? I buy a car today. I'm going to make this up. The software is 2 years old. I buy it, drive for 10 years, sell it. Someone else buys it. They drive for 10 years. They sell it. I live in the U.S., so it probably happens that it gets put on a boat, sent to Central or South America, where someone else buys it and drives another 10 to 20 years. So think of what happens near the end of that cycle, right? Imagine finding a computer from 1979, booting it up, making it run, making it secure. We have no idea how to secure 40-year-old consumer software. There's a reason Microsoft and Apple depreciate their operating systems after a few generations. It is hard to maintain the old stuff. And we're about to have a lot of old stuff. So what's the mechanism, right? How do we ensure that a 40-year-old car is still secure, right? Or a 40-year-old thermostat, or a 25-year-old refrigerator, or a 12-year-old DVR player? I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer here, but it is something that we are running a collision course on because we're used to patching working. But it is these expensive devices with dedicated security teams. I mean, cars will have them, but do we expect them to have a test bed of 40 years times 20 models and run patches through 80 different cars before releasing them? Maybe, but that's a lot of work. So I don't know. Christian McKrishna, how do you respond to people advocating ending encryption because they think it limits law enforcement's job? I say that that is way too. We are too vulnerable to allow you to have that capability. So the question really is, how do we security versus security, right? There is security in this device being secure. There is security in this device being vulnerable, so law enforcement can eavesdrop on it. Which is more important? As long as this device is in the hands of every single, elected official and judge and police officer and CEO and election official and nuclear power plant operator, it is vital for national security that this be as secure as possible. And that includes end-to-end encryption. Yes, it limits the ability for you to eavesdrop on it. I'm sorry. Right? We cannot risk national security to give you that ability. It is too important for this to be secure. That is the fundamental argument. It is not security versus privacy. It is security versus security. And we must, because we are so vulnerable, because this is so important, adopt a defense-dominant strategy. Defense must win. I get that. If we defend us, we also defend the criminals. We're stuck with that. We can't do anything else. But defense is more important. We're just too vulnerable. Peter is asking about basically potential geopolitical splintering of the internet. I think I'm worried about this. And I see kind of three basic splits along in three groups. A U.S. and U.S.-centric model, which basically corporations spy on everybody, and that's the way it goes. A China-centric model, government spies on everybody, and that's the way it goes. And an EU-centric model. I mean, those seem to be the three major geopolitical centers around arguments about the internet and privacy, security, how it should work. I mean, yes, there are outliers, right? We just saw, Burma, the coup. They, you read the story, military people walked into the telco and said, shut off the internet now, and then started clipping wires randomly. Right? That's what happened, right? So there's going to be little bits of splintering. Russia might go its own way, but the three big poles seem to be U.S., China, and the EU. And I don't know. I mean, everyone talks a big game. No one wants to cut anybody off because it's so valuable to be connected. So, Salko doesn't have a question, but says he cannot hear any voice. So anybody who can do troubleshooting, please help him. Actually, I'm assuming you all can hear me. Nobody's actually saying anything, and I can't see your faces. So I might be talking to nobody. All right, that's disturbing. Okay, so at least one person hears me.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely audible.
We hear you.
All right. Thank you all.
Testing.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So Ralph asks if our jobs are at risk because of AI. I think not. I think so. You can read about the cybersecurity skills gap, and you see numbers like 300,000 more jobs than there are people. And what I think AI will do is will free us from some of the more mundane tasks and allow us to do the more interesting and more important tasks. I think it's a long way off before AI will take our jobs. Parts of our job will be automated, and that will be a good thing. So I don't think you have to worry at all about replacement anytime soon. There's just too much creativity, too much stuff going on. 17 new messages. Who are you people? All right, question about insurance. So yeah, I do think insurance is a part of the solution and a driver for change. Right? Think what insurance does. Insurance converts a variable risk into a fixed cost. That is why companies buy insurance, because you can budget it in a way you can't budget risk. And once you have insurance, the insurance company will start putting demands on you. Right? If you have insurance against fire, your building must be up to code, or the insurance company won't pay, basically. Right? So the insurance industry forces companies to meet certain fireproof codes. And I think you'll get the same sort of thing in cybersecurity. Well, if insurance becomes ubiquitous, the insurance companies will demand, certain practices. They're going to make this up. If you don't have two-factor authentication, then we're not going to pay for these sorts of breaches. Right? That's the rule. Right? That's part of your policy. And again, think of the economics. If the cost of two-factor authentication is this much, and the reduction in insurance premiums is this much, then suddenly it's valuable. It makes sense to do it. And that's how insurance drives change. Right? In differential premiums, whether they will write the insurance in the first place, and companies respond to that. So yes, I think insurance it's not the total solution. I think it's part of the solution. Question about IPv6. So yes, of course, IPv6 is much better than IPv4. Remember, IPv4 is the insecure original internet protocol that didn't have any security in it because it was not designed to have security. IPv6 has security built in. It is much better. Now, we've been trying for what? Since the mid-90s, so it's 25 years, to get people to move to IPv6. And this is another economics issue. It doesn't make sense financially to switch to IPv6 until most people have. You basically have a first mover disadvantage. You don't want to be the first people to convert to IPv6. Everyone's basically waiting for everybody else. This is something where government could step in and be a coordinator. Like, we are going to demand all companies move to IPv6 by this date. And that becomes a forcing function. I am going to search for another URL for you people. All right, the next question is about blockchain. And yes, blockchain is absolutely useless for everything, ever. So that is my essay on blockchain and security. I just posted it to the chat. Yeah, it actually has no value at all. Absolutely none. And it's a reasonably subtle argument. It's not a long essay. It's from Wired. So I recommend you read that. And where I really go down hard on blockchains as being a completely useless thing that's just being pushed by a bunch of libertarian crypto bros. Dan asked more about cyber risk insurance. I kind of feel like I talked about that. I don't know where it's going. I thought we would have more insurance more ubiquitously by this point. Why we don't, I don't really understand. I'm not anyone who knows that industry, so it's hard for me to answer that question. But I do think that eventually insurance will become a dominant force in cybersecurity. Just don't know when. Cryptocurrencies crushed because of quantum computers. God, I hope so. It'd be great to get rid of them. But I don't think so. I think we'll be able to, just switch hash functions and double the key length, double the hash size, and we'll be fine. So I'm not, as a mathematical construct, I don't think that blockchains worry too much about quantum computing. I don't think it's going to be a big risk because you can update. So we have the governance structure to do it. So that works out. Opinion of the Ghost protocol. So this is the protocol by which GCHQ wants to eavesdrop on your communications by hacking your phone. Stupid idea. Again, defense dominance. You cannot make these things insecure. And I get that the UK government wants to, but the Chinese government does too. And you allow one, you have to allow everybody. So I'm not in favor of pretty much any way of hacking these systems. Who do I follow, read in cybersecurity? The way to get that question answered is read my blog and see who I quote. So I don't have a list, but that's where you get it. Facebook Australia, who won? I have not read the articles about how about the compromise and how it was reached, but it is truly fascinating to think about a company having sort of equal power to a country. And Australia is not a small dinky country either. It is a big country. So I think anytime Facebook and a country face off and Facebook isn't crushed to the ground, Facebook wins, right? Because they show they're a global power. But I don't know the details of the compromise. And it's in my list of things to read probably this weekend. So I can't answer that question. All right, and then encryption's another Ghost protocol. I mean, it's another way to break encryption. They pretend it's not, but it is. And it doesn't break the algorithm, but it breaks, the key distribution system. Same thing. I mean, the hair splitting is not proper. It doesn't make sense. And the group of us who wrote the various key risks paper, the one in the 90s and the one we wrote a few years ago, we're writing a piece on sort of these new generation of ways to break cryptography and how they're equally bad. Now, a question about cybersecurity training. I know very little about cybersecurity training. I'm not a big fan of cybersecurity training because I think it pushes the responsibility from where it belongs to the users. Now, our society in generally is so complex and designed so you do not have to be an expert in the thing to use a thing, right? You do not have to be a pharmacologist to go to the drugstore. You do not have to be an aviation safety expert to fly an airplane. Right? We decide as society to encapsulate the expertise in a government agency and let them be our proxy. Right? Someone else figures out what automobile safety and reliability should be, so I can just buy a car based on color and the stereo system. Right? I don't need to inspect the engine. And cybersecurity training, I think, tries to say, look, you need to be an expert here before you should use the internet. And that's just wrong. We want the internet to be so that everyone can use it. And the kind of training and advice we give you, I think, is advice that shows how bad the stuff is. And think about a cybersecurity advice. Don't plug in strange USB sticks. It's a USB stick. What should you do with it? Right? The problem is not that people plug in USB sticks. The problem is that the USB system was designed so that plugging in USB sticks is a potential security risk. That's on the designers of USB. Don't click on strange URLs. They're a URL. What are you going to do with them? Why is it that a strange URL should be damaging? Right? Don't open strange files. All of this is advice that covers up from bad system design. It is not, so I don't want it. I don't want the companies to be able to push the responsibility onto the user. Well, you clicked on the URL, you deserve to get hacked. That's bullshit. URLs shouldn't be dangerous, period. But the system shouldn't allow them to be dangerous. Right? You bought the drug from the unlicensed pharmacist, you deserve to die. No, I don't buy that. That's not the right way to build society. So, you need some education. You need a driver's license to get a car, but not a mechanic's license. So there's going to be some middle ground. But I think most education hides the users. All right, so I'm at IPv6 taking over 2003. Yep, that's about right. Who do I admire not in the technocracy? I'm bad at that. I'm bad at knowing who people are. All right, more about IPv6. No, I think that the conversion is just hard. It is hard for a network to convert to IPv4 and IPv6. It requires a lot of buying stuff and rewriting stuff, and no one wants to be the first to do it. Basically, it's too expensive and there's no benefit. Right, and it's that cost benefit ratio. And governments are how we solve these sorts of collective action problems. So that's where you think of. All right, questions about bug bounty programs. This is interesting. I think in the beginning they were good, right? The idea is to incent researchers to sell bugs to the companies. They get publicity, they get some money, the bugs get fixed. It is a counterbalance to the black market, even though the black market pays a lot more. Well, the gray market does, right? The companies that use them and put them in cyber weapons, the hacking teams, the gamma groups, they pay the most. So bug bounty programs are important, but they have turned into catch and kill. Right? Companies now use them to silence researchers in a way they weren't intended, and that is a problem. So I think we need to fix the bug bounty program, but the initial idea was really good. NIST elliptic curve cryptography, use it or avoid, use it. That was an easy one. Do you like the Silicon Valley TV series? I don't watch television. I haven't watched a television show in a long time. Actually, that's not true. Occasionally, my wife and I find a show, we watch the whole thing, but I haven't owned a television since I went to college, and I don't watch television as a matter of course. So I don't have. Silicon Valley, I guess, is the name of a TV series. So that shows you how bad I am in that. Do I think Australia sets a precedence? In some cases, yes. I think Australia is often a test bed for the NSA and for the US and the UK, because their laws are much more lax in terms of freedoms and privacy. So if the government get away with things in Australia, they can't in the UK or the US. So I think we tend to use them as a test bed and hope they set a precedent. Don't know whether they will or not, but yeah, that is certainly part of it. Because decentralized technology other than blockchains, yes, I'm a big fan of decentralization. I think it is an important security measure. Like, we were way more secure when there are 10,000 ISPs than when there are 20, right? Or 100,000 email domains rather than 6. So decentralization is really important. One of the reasons I like Solid is that it is a decentralized data storage system. So decentralization is very powerful. Particularly that blockchain is not actually decentralized. They pretend it is. There are like 3 different miners, all controlled by the Chinese government. There's like one exchange. There are 2 wallets. All the hardware to do mining is made by one company. All the chips are made by one different company. The centralization all up and down the blockchain stack. And it is a myth that it is decentralized. Most people who own Bitcoin don't own the Bitcoin. The exchange owns it. So yeah, but yes, decentralization I think is really important and really valuable, and something I like pushing. I think having Google in charge of everything is bad. Having Facebook in charge of everything is bad. Regarding hacking, breaking crypto is the driver improving security, the threat of attackers. So frankly, I'm not sure I understand your question. A lot of the driver is, academic. Let's design cool stuff. Let's break cool stuff and write papers. So less the actual threat and more the the academic back and forth. Am I answering your question?
I guess so. What I was thinking was, so the threat to the current standards that hackers pose, like Ghost Protocol, is that a driver for the defense side to keep and rethinking things in order to combat that and improve things?
Some, not as much as you want, right? I mean, so NIST has this post-quantum cryptography standard process going on because of the potential future threat of attackers. So does that count? It kind of does.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But that I also think about the patching and everything else, that the fact that people are finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them is giving, the producers the reason to go and patch them. Without one side of the coin, you wouldn't have the other.
Yeah, I mean, right. The one of the reasons I was really attracted to the science, the academic discipline in like early career, was its adversarial nature. I mean, it was fun. You design stuff, you break stuff, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm writing papers in the 90s. It doesn't matter what your credentials are. Did you break the thing or not? This is way different than like paleontology, where they all argue with each other, but their pedigree matters an enormous amount. In cryptography, the math is the proof. I mean, you can have no degree at all, but if you break the system, your stuff is publishable. And that's kind of neat. I like that. Question, did the NSA put a backdoor on the DES? No, they did the opposite. They improved DES. Right? So 1970s, the NSA did two things. IBM proposes DES, proposes Lucifer for the DES standard. And the NSA lowers the key length from 64 bits to 56 bits. Right? So they weakened it. But it was a very public weakening. Everybody could do the math. It is 2 to the 8th easier to break. What they also did was change all the S boxes. And what they did is they made the S boxes immune to differential cryptanalysis, which we would not learn about until the 1990s when Beam and Shamir wrote the original papers. So they weakened it publicly and strengthened it secretly. Now, I mean, it's still 2 to 56, right? It's still breakable in that amount of time, but they made sure there wasn't a back door. But the only break was the front door. All right, 15 minutes, 13 questions. We'll see if this is possible. The rail industry, how do you incentivize private companies to deliver secure national infrastructure? It is easy. You put the CEO in jail if he doesn't, right? We know how to incent companies, right? You jail them, you fine them. This is not hard, right? How do you stop companies from, I don't know, putting salmonella in their food, from selling pajamas that catch on fire, right? We know how to do this. We regulate them. This isn't hard. If you were a security conference attendee, who would you like to speak right now? I think Nicole Perlroth would be a great speaker. She just published her book on cyber weapons, on the cyber weapons arms industry, with the great title of This is the Way They Tell Me the World Ends. It's a great book. I'm going to have her guest lecturing in my class next week. Haha. So I think she's going to be great to hear. And you're writing new questions, you people. What are you doing? What are your views on shared responsibility in cloud computing? I don't know if I have them. I should pay attention to cloud computing security more. And I don't. What direction do you think cybersecurity is heading towards making it more secure and cost effective? I think it is. I think cryptography is already secure and cost effective. I don't need it. I mean, my problems in security are not in the math and not in the crypto. They're in everything around the crypto. The software, the network, the usability, the key management. So I've already got secure and cost-effective cryptography. I don't need anything else. I need everything around it to be better. The crypto is already the strongest link in my chain. Right? Making it stronger isn't going to help. I need to fix the other links in the chain. All right. I lost my place in the chat. There we are. Oh, wow. Our OSSCP, ePIVABA, and other offensive security certifications. I know very little about certifications, so I'm a bad person to ask about that. I don't follow which certifications are good, which ones you should get. I mean, I think what certifications are doing is they are allowing the easy algorithmic culling of resumes. It's like, we know when you write tech resumes, throw all of the acronyms in there you can, because you don't want to be kicked out by the algorithm that says, must say Perl, must say C++, must say CISSP. So, if that is the threat model, then all certifications are good, right? Because they keep you in the pile so a human can get to you. Donald Trump getting kicked off Twitter shows, yes, it does show the power of the tech companies. More powerful than any government in the world. It is interesting, right? I mean, in some ways they are not. They don't have a monopoly on violence like legitimate governments do, but they are definitely powerful in a way that governments are. Just like Facebook gets to battle Australia, which is fundamentally weird. So yes, the quasi-government power of tech companies is something we have to figure out, and this is a hard one. Future skills of the CISO and CSO and split between tech and social soft skills. Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I mean, clearly both are required. I mean, I want the CISO to have actually more soft social skills than tech skills. You can always hire tech skills. It's hard to hire social skills. But knowing enough tech to have a good bullshit detector. So I guess I'm landing on the side of social soft. Do I have a favorite story to share from a conference? Not off the top of my head. That's the kind of question you want like 24 hours in advance. There are now 22 questions. You are not getting to them all. What do I think of SQRL for secure, quick, and honest login? I think it's a good protocol. Oh, now there are comments. Good. I don't have to answer comments. Viable idea to build an entirely new network from the ground up based on non-anonymity openness. No, I don't think we can. I don't think we can start from the ground up. I think it's just not going to happen. We're going to constantly modify what we have. Right? I mean, lots of people talk about starting from the scratch, building a new internet. I just don't think it's viable. There's just too much infrastructure. When you talk about a first mover problem, no one's going to swap. What's on my reading list? No, I don't publish my reading list. Maybe I should. NIST ECC might have NSA backdoor. I think not. I forget why. But I think I looked at that and decided that no, it's unlikely there's an NSA backdoor. And the reason you'd worry about it is are the constants. Right? You saw dual EC PRNG, which is an elliptic curve based random number generator, where the constants contain an NSA backdoor. So it's not an unrealistic fear, but I think we know that it's not in the NIST standard. I forget why. Philip, future of Tor. I don't know. God, Tor is a tough one. It has really important uses in anonymity, and there are dissidents around the world who rely on it to stay alive. But it also enables quite a lot of cybercrime, including the sharing of child exploitative materials, which is really bad. And I don't know. For those who know Tor, I think we probably should get rid of Tor hidden services. I think Tor hidden services do a lot more harm than good in the world, because that's what facilitates the black markets and drugs and the child porn sites. I want to keep the ability to use Tor to browse the web anonymously. So, quick quiz: the most common site on the dark web. Anybody? In chat or in voice? Most common site in the dark web. Guesses? Facebook. That is correct. Facebook is the most common site on the dark web. That's what the dark web does. Lets people go to Facebook. And that's important. Right? But if I'm going to kill the Silk Road, which is another suggestion, Silk Road is a hidden service. And I can keep the good of Tor while getting rid of the hidden service. Now, this is a minority view. I am on the Tor board, and the other people in Tor do not share that view. But that's so the future. I don't know. You can imagine Tor getting killed. by countries that say, look, you are facilitating child porn and you just can't go away. And that would be bad. And I kind of want Tor to save itself before it's too late. Tor about decentralization, right? So, right, Tor is, in a sense, a centralized anonymity service. It is decentralized in its implementation, but it's centralized in its core programming. And this is the problem of decentralization. Things naturally centralize. And you know, history is back and forth between centralization and decentralization. Look at the railroads. Look at everything. All right, I have blown through all the questions, and I will ignore the cheeky follow-up. And after COVID, was the future of academic security conference? No, I think they go back to physical. I think they'll always contain a virtual component, but I think they got to go back to physical. I think we've learned that virtual has value, but also limitations.
And can I ask you one last question?
Yes, you are the last question.
Yeah, what happens to education after this? So we've moved much more towards blended learning. And
Yeah,
our
I don't know.
students
Right?
are learning in the cloud. What's the future model looking like?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be, again, some blended. That people want both. But people, you know, I miss people. But on the other hand, I couldn't do this if it was all physical. You'd have me, you know, Skype into the class virtually. So, you know, there's benefit in both. Let's get the best of both somehow.
Yeah.
I miss teaching in person. I do.
Yeah, I'd agree. Good.
Thank you all.
Could everyone just unmute themselves for a second and give a round of applause for Bruce?
Thank you.
Thank you.